Getting a team to take initiative and solve problems can be tough, and you often worry about taking on more team members because of the extra burden it's going to put you under as a business owner. Tune into today's podcast. We're going to talk about a simple process for building a motivated team that shows initiative. Anyway, what are we talking about today, bud?
Well, today we're talking about the key to growing a successful team and how that's giving your people on the tools what they need to actually shine. So, in this case, a lot of the time it's going to feel like it's going to take your input, but you actually can't scale a team or your business for that matter past the point where you're basically wiping their butts for them, which we'll reference later.
Yeah, there is only a certain number of butts you can wipe.
That's right, yeah. And I mean, you've got your own ones, that's one.
Yep.
You can't stack up too many more after that. So now there's lots you can do to help your team do a better job with their day-to-day tasks. Like you can train them on their skill gaps, you can put systems in place that they can follow rather than needing to think for themselves. But basically, all of that can end up going to waste if you can't drive this one key piece of the puzzle, which is initiative and problem solving. So
taking ownership of things.
Yeah, that's right. So today we're basically going to cover a system to drive those key skills and empower your team so that then you can continue to grow without having to worry about the burden of the extra management.
Yeah, nothing worse than lots of phone calls. Oh, how do I do this?
Yeah. That old chestnut.
Oh, sorry, boss. How do I do this? Not good. All the time.
Not good. Waste of time.
Drive you insane. We tell stories here, and I am the master storyteller.
Right, whatever.
Yep. But I know you're like amping to tell a story. So go, man. Tell us a story.
Yeah. I got a story on this one. It's actually one I've told before.
And look, team, we know if you're listening and you're a dad, you'll know that Phil is definitely a dad because when you start telling the same stories over and over again, that means you're qualified as a dad.
Yeah,
and everyone rolls their eyes and pretends like they're excited. I am actually excited. It's a good story.
Well, wait till I'm a granddad, man. I'll have all the grandkids around and tell the same 5 stories. It's kind of like Pokemon. You got to catch them all. All right. Anyway, so the story I was going to tell that I think is pretty apt for this situation is actually about my son George. So if you've been listening before, you may have heard this, but basically,
he's a fine young man too.
Fine young man, and it's actually about when we had to teach him how to wipe his own butt. So if you are a parent, you've probably done this as well, and if you haven't, then good luck. It's coming up.
Yeah.
But in this case, it was basically about the whole process of teaching him, and what we found is that at the start, he'd do the old, go in, do his business, and he'd come out and he'd have had 1 or 2 wipes, and he'd always come out and ask us to check, which basically meant I've had 1 or 2 wipes and I want you to finish it for me. And what we found is that just carried on, tried, teaching him better and showing him some different stuff and blah, blah, blah. But he always...
So you've got techniques for this stuff.
Oh, I've got different techniques, mate.
Depending on...
I have techniques. You just watch yourself,
Good.
mate. But in this case, basically he'd always come out to check. And what we actually ended up doing was eventually we said to him, mate, look, we're not going to check anymore. You know how to do this. We've shown you plenty of times. So what's going to happen is we'll just leave you to it. And when you think you're done, you pull your pants up and you walk out. And then so, obviously he tests you, comes out and he says, hey, Dad, I think I'm done. Can you check? And I said, nah, and just carried on with what I was doing. And he goes, well, what if I'm not finished? And I go, well, then you better keep wiping. And he goes, but what if I don't know I'm finished and I pull my pants up and I get poo in my undies? And I said, then you get poo in your undies. And he goes, oh, and I'm like, do you think you're finished? He's like, oh, I might keep wiping. And so I did that a couple of times, literally 1 or 2 times, and then he's nailed it now. And really, I think this is very, very similar to how your staff act when they're calling you for help. A lot of the time, they're not actually needing your help; they're just wanting it. Basically, what I feel like here is it's actually a bit of a transference of responsibility more than
100%.
Anything else. Yep. It's not that they don't know what to do; it's not that they don't know how to do it. It's that they want to check with you, so that if they miss anything, it's your fault, not theirs. So it absolves them of that responsibility. And I think, you're probably, if you're having a similar situation, getting heaps of phone calls from your staff or finding you need to go and check for them or wipe their butt, that you're probably losing a lot of precious time, efficiency, and headspace by doing that. And so you might actually just need to begin taking responsibility and initiative, well, they need to, just like George. And hey, look, sometimes they might get poo in their undies metaphorically, but that's actually part of the learning process. So they need to start taking that responsibility, and you need to stop being there as the backstop. That's the only way they'll do it. And
there's a concept here that I think is kind of useful. It's called learned helplessness.
That's the one.
So people kind of they just learn to be helpless, and we as the business owner can actually aid and abet that helplessness by creating a situation where we let them be helpless, and we do basically metaphorically keep wiping bums and answering questions, which
that's it. And I mean, it's learned helplessness, but you taught it to them.
That's right.
That's how they learned it.
Yeah.
And so the only way they'll learn something else is if you teach that to them by changing your approach.
And I think that's a big thing with leadership is it's very easy to, and I understand if you're listening why you would do this, blame your team when they do something silly or keep asking questions or make a kind of a dumb mistake or, just don't show initiative. It's easy to blame them. But unfortunately, the responsibility to change it always lies with you. You can't make them change. You can only change what you're doing, which in turn, might change the way they operate. And that's what we're really going to get into today, right?
100%. So obviously, look, if we can't make this change and get the guys to take more initiative and responsibility, then we can run into a few problems.
Millions of phone calls is the first one.
Yeah, that's for sure.
I mean, most, contractors and tradies and plumbers and electricians, got a business in this space, your ear literally is on fire from answering the phone.
Yeah.
Particularly if you don't have a strong management team in place, you're getting calls from clients, you're getting calls from suppliers, contractors, and your team.
Yeah.
And it might be 30, 50 calls a day, sometimes more. You dread the phone actually ringing. You can cut a lot of those out. So I think a lot of phone calls, you're not actually going to get time to get to the stuff that you want to do.
Yeah, or that you need to do, really. That's the real risk. I mean, there's stuff that you want to do, but there's stuff you need to do. And if you're busy on the phone checking all day for your staff, what are you not doing that you should be doing?
Or, I mean, sometimes people will actually drive, to the jobs out in the field, out on site to actually check stuff or finish off little bits of jobs that, really, if the team was showing initiative, we'd want them to do. So I think that's important. And all of that leads you to being busy and stress because you've got more on your plate that you can deal with, and that is obviously a challenge for a lot of people listening, and that's one of the reasons we do what we do is to try and obviously make more money, but you lessen the stress and make life more fun.
100%.
The flip side of it, though, is we've talked about what happens to you. What happens to your team, though? Because actually, I think you're disempowering your team.
Big time. Well, you're actually robbing them of the opportunity to grow and learn and develop. I actually found when I lived overseas, so I lived in France for a wee while, and when I did, I knew no French going over there. It took me about 3 months to get to a point where I was pretty conversationally fluent, and then I never learned another word, literally. And I think the biggest thing was as soon as I was kind of capable, people stopped actually correcting me and stopped teaching me anything, and so I couldn't learn past the point where they actually would hold my hand. And it's the same, like if you constantly go in and do that last little bit for the staff or make that last little decision, you rob them of the ability to learn to make it themselves. So, yeah, you disempower them big time.
Yeah, and that has an impact of stopping the growth of your business because for a few reasons. Obviously, you're busy all the time and you can't get onto stuff that's going to make the business grow. But even if you could, you actually don't want to because all you think about or even subconsciously is, wow, I'm just going to have more people asking me more questions, and I'm kind of over that.
Yeah, big time.
And so it's quite deep subconscious thing. We don't want to get all D&M here, deep and meaningful, but this is a thing, right? People don't grow towards pain. So if you think it's going to be more painful, subconsciously you'll start sabotaging your own growth in your business because you're like, that's not fun.
Yeah, exactly. You look at that growth as being something that's going to be difficult, so you'll subconsciously put yourself off.
Yep.
But hey, look, what if we do get it right? What if we can employ some good techniques, guys take initiative, responsibility, then what?
Yeah, I think the phone calls stop, less phone calls, less people asking for help, more people actually giving it a crack and learning. That's important. Headspace and more room to breathe, so you can get some of the clutter of everyone else's problems out of your head and focus on what you want to work on. And that gives you time to work on some tasks that are perhaps more high value.
Yeah.
Not that, getting the work done, getting the projects finished, that's obviously hugely important. Don't get me wrong. But the real job of a business owner is to grow the business, not to get the jobs done out in the field on the site. That's the team's job. And that's a whole nother discussion, right?
For sure.
Yeah. It's very easy to fall into that because that's, as business owners, most of us have started as tradespeople, so we're really good at that.
Yeah.
The cool thing is, not only is it good for you, it's good for your team. So they actually start to feel empowered. They, take responsibility. I mean, let's be honest. There'll be some people who just can't take responsibility, and they're the people you don't want in your business, and you've got to, free up their future.
For sure.
But most people actually thrive on having responsibility, and it allows them to grow, and they love that independence, which is cool. And you're like, wow, these guys are actually pretty darn good. Wow.
Yeah.
And that's an experience people get when they start to have people take initiative.
That's right.
Skill level goes up, and you can grow your business because you're starting to create some capacity. People can do stuff on their own, which is the whole point of being a business and having a team.
Yeah, well, you start looking at each addition to your team as something that's going to help you and make things better, rather than each addition of your team as another bum to wipe. And actually, that just feels painful. So, yeah, it really gets you excited about the growth.
Well, and this is a huge thing. And what we notice, when we talk to people who maybe inquire about getting some help in one of our coaching programs, is often they say, "Hey, look, I don't want to grow my business. I just want to make it easier to run."
Yeah,
and that's actually. Well, it is true. They don't want to do that, but they don't want to do that because all they see is it being painful.
Yeah. And a lot of the time, as you grow, it actually can become easier to run because it's bigger. You get more infrastructure, you get more help, you make more money, which actually makes things easier. Yeah. So yeah, I understand not everyone wants to build a huge empire, but at the same time, if you're scared of taking on anybody, you might tell yourself it's because you don't really want to grow, but really it's I don't want the headache of a bigger team. So yeah, you can flip that on its head. Yeah,
and you might have seen someone down the road who's grown and blown up. Yeah, that's not because growth is the problem. It's because the way it was managed and the way they led it. That was the problem.
Yeah, exactly. So how do we do it, mate?
Solutions.
Let's talk solutions. Let's do it.
Have a cup of my delicious green tea first, mate. I know how much you like it.
Always drinking your bloody tea. Yeah. Well,
solutions. Yeah.
Let's talk about the 1-3-1 technique.
Yeah. The 1-3-1 technique is a cool technique that you can use to push the responsibility for problem solving back to your team. And this is not something that we've invented. It comes from the 1 Minute Manager.
Yep.
Ken Blanchard is well-known author. Writes some really simple books. They took like an hour to read. They're not big. But the 1-3-1 technique is really simple. Your team, rather than asking you what they should do, they need to come to you with one problem. So they need to be able to describe the problem. They need to come with 3 suggestions and 1 recommendation.
That's it.
So 1 problem, 3 suggestions, and 1 recommendation.
Yeah, that's it. So it's really, really important that they get this. And obviously the recommendation comes as one of their suggestions, just to make that super clear. As they have got their 1 problem, their 3 suggestions, and one of those is the one they recommend. And if you can get them into this mindset where they approach, talking to you with problems, they approach it this way, it means they've already done all the pre-thinking. And the other thing is, they're pretty confident, because a lot of the time when you get questions from your staff, they kind of know what they want to do. It's more of a permission call than anything else. And so this helps them realize that that's what they're doing, which is actually quite important, because that's what they're doing, but they might genuinely think they need your help here. So when they have to come to it this way, it helps them to realize as well what's really going on.
That's killer. So 1 problem, 3 suggestions, and 1 recommendation. Now, how do they get to the suggestions? Well, that's a good question. There could be a number of ways. They'll probably have a couple of approaches to a problem that they can take. But we'd encourage, and we talk to our members about this. Hey, well, why don't the team set up a chat group or something, and they can call some of the other tradespeople or technicians in the business and say, hey, we've got this happening. I'm thinking about this or that. Is there anything else you think we could do here? So they leverage off the experience of the rest of the team. Before coming up with suggestions, so that you're not in the loop.
Yeah. And one thing you might find is that when you first start doing this, you ask for their suggestions, their recommendation, they might say, oh, I genuinely don't know. I don't know. And you just say, well, hey, what do you think? What do you think? And they'll be like, well, I don't know. You say, well, hey, look, just top of your head, what do you think? Oh, well, I could do X, Y, Z. And often it's actually right. The big thing is that they might just really try to push that helplessness that they've learned, just try to really project that out. So you might have to dig a little bit to get them to do this. So but what do you think is a really easy line that you can use, just to make sure that they actually do follow this process. And if you can get them to do this, it really allows you to make what we call the 6-inch putt. So what that's all about is, if you actually do have to have any input, what you want it to be is the metaphorical 6-inch putt. So if you think about golf, any problem is the entire hole, and you don't want to be teeing off. You don't want to be playing approach shots, hitting out of the sand. That's definitely not what you want to be doing.
No, we don't.
You don't want to be doing any of that. For you, if I'm going to be involved, it's to make that 6-inch putt at the end. The team needs to do the legwork up until there. So in this case with the 131, they come with a problem, 3 suggestions and a recommendation, and your 6-inch putt is, good idea.
Yeah, do it.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so this is a really simple concept. And another way of looking at this is something else that Ken Blanchard's talked about is not my monkey.
Yeah.
So what the heck does not my monkey mean? Well, it's like when you have a problem and it's your problem, you're the one with the monkey on your back.
That's right.
And what happens is the business owner or senior person in the business is most of your team have got into the habit of giving you all their monkeys, all their decisions, all the responsibility for the decisions. And so what happens is you end up carrying around a whole darn zoo of monkeys on your back, which is why you're so darn tired and stressed out.
Yeah.
And so this is an important way to actually hand the monkey back to the people that it belongs to.
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, you might even have experienced this. You're lying there late at night and you've got all these things on your mind, just weighing you down like, I wonder if I made the right call here.
How do we do this job?
Yeah, what ended up happening with this job or that customer or whatever. But, a lot of that stuff is actually because you're holding the monkeys for everyone else. It's because you haven't actually delegated the decision-making to your staff. And so the responsibility of every single thing that happened in the business comes down to a call you made. And therefore, it can stress you out, man. It can really just weigh on you.
Yep.
So,
and there is only so many monkeys anyone can carry around.
That's it.
And that's what stops the growth of the business and your enjoyment of having it as well, which is a big part of it.
Yeah.
So I think something that we've talked about is it's, sometimes there is a knowledge gap.
Yeah. Yeah.
And sometimes they may not know something.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time they will or they need to learn. So our job as the leader is to figure out what's the difference between a responsibility shift and a true knowledge gap.
Yeah.
And so our job is really only to help with true knowledge gaps. Or even better, if you've got other people in the team who can help with that knowledge gap, point them in that direction. They can help each other.
Yeah, that's it. And I think in this case, like if you find you're getting similar knowledge gaps popping up across the team, well then, hey, that's a whole team training you might need to do. Or it might be individual. But I think recognizing that difference between them trying to shift responsibility, pass on the monkey, and a true knowledge gap is really the skill here. Because a lot of the time they'll act like it's a true knowledge gap, and that's why, like I was saying, you got to prompt, you've got to really drag it out of them, because they might actually genuinely think they don't know. But like if you just ask them, well, hey, look, what do you think? Like just top of your head, let's just try to figure this out. What are some things that you might be able to do? I don't care how silly it sounds. Let's just spitball some ideas. What you're actually doing when you do this, you're teaching them to problem solve. You're teaching them to try to think, laterally about how they could do something, rather than just every time they hit a roadblock, they ask someone. It's important that they start thinking a little bit. And that's what you're prompting when you're prompting these things. And if they really do hit a wall, then you have a training point for them, and you can fill that knowledge gap.
Yeah, and this is also awkward. And if you're listening, you're probably thinking, well, what happens if they muck it up and it's like a big mess, and I've got issues and it costs me money and stuff. Well, what happens if you keep picking up the tab for them the whole time? Yeah. That's the other side of the story.
Yeah.
What's the long-term cost? Because it feels like a short-term cost, but there's a long-term cost if you just make them helpless.
Yeah, that's right.
Fundamentally, it's what we do as the leader that builds the culture that'll drive initiative.
Yeah. And there's a flip side to that as well, because if you think about it, some people, you might be listening to this right now and thinking, geez, if I do all of that process, it's actually taking me a lot longer to do all of that than it would be if I just answered their question. I could just answer their question in 30 seconds, but instead I'm going to sit here and have a 10-minute conversation, dragging answers out of them. And I'm like, yep, it might take a little bit longer at the start while they get used to this process. But what happens is they start getting so used to the 131, and they start getting so used to the fact that their recommendation's usually right, and that you basically, all you do is that 6-inch putt where you go, yeah, do it. That they go, actually, you know what, I can solve this problem. So what happens, it takes a little bit longer at the start when they get used to it, but then you just stop getting phone calls, unless they really are genuinely having a knowledge gap stuck moment. And then when they turn up, they are so used to the 131 that they actually turn up with the 131, the whole conversation takes no time because they're like, mate, I just want to give you my 131 right now. It's blah, 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 blah. And then you can be like, yep, cool, do it. And they're like, oh, sweet. Yeah, I wasn't going to call, but I was just really stuck on this one. Again, 30-second conversation, done. But they solved the problem. So, yeah, may take a little bit longer at the start, but it's going to save you so much time moving forward.
And look, sometimes they might skin their knees and make a bit of a mistake. Or, well, what is a mistake anyway? Because sometimes your way of doing it is, not perfect either.
It's just one way.
One way. Maybe it is a good way. Maybe your way is 95% and their way is 85%. Still excellent. Still an A. Still good.
Yeah.
But if you don't let them skin their knees a little bit in a sort of controlled, safe way, they'll never do it. If people are never allowed to fail, they're never allowed to learn.
That's right.
And I know, if you're listening, you probably think, geez, I don't want any client ever to have a sub-perfect performance. But if your business is tapped out and you're tapped out all the time, a whole bunch of clients are going to have, poor experience because you just can't keep up. So
that's it.
It is a bit of a mind bend, but it's definitely worth putting in that that mental hard work to lift them up, because it's going to lift you up as well.
That's the one. And I think for me, there's a real big part to this is like, if you want this to stick, I think you really just have to look at how you actually back this up within your values.
100%.
And like, I think about that whole thing of, different core values that people have in their business. And you may have core values already, or you may not. You may call them standards. You might call them anything you want. But a lot of people, I'll see that they'll have a core value of something around like quality or perfection on the job, top quality workmanship, whatever it is. The hard thing is, if that's one of your values and you really push that, but you also really want them to take initiative, that can actually be kind of conflicting. Because if I'm one of the staff and I'm sitting there on a job a little bit stuck, and I know that my boss is going to be really angry if I don't get this perfect, then that's going to cause me to want to call, make sure, definitely get this right. So at the same time, if you want them to take initiative and not make the call, then you have to risk sometimes it may not be perfect. So you kind of need to make a choice, right? You obviously want the highest possible quality, but if initiative is more important to you, then you need to reinforce that, which means that if they make a mistake, you can't bollock them straight away. The first thing you actually have to do is congratulate them for taking initiative, which is hard because you'll be mad about the mistake, right? But it's really, really, really important, because otherwise, if are you going to be more angry about one or two mistakes here and there, but heaps of initiative, or more angry about every job's perfect, but I had to finish every single one of them and take 100 phone calls a day? Like, you can't always have it both ways. So you kind of need to make a choice.
And that's an important thing. It's like anything. You need to acknowledge and reward what you want. So if people show initiative, it's really important to call that out and shine a light of of praise on that.
Yeah.
Because that's what you want to encourage.
Exactly.
And I think the thing here, this is a big challenge for a lot of us who are, by the virtue of the fact that we own the business, we're probably pretty good at doing the jobs and exceptionally high standards is what's helped us get there. But perfection is the enemy of progress.
100%.
And excellence is what you want. And excellence is like a 85 to 95%.
That's it. And again, I'm not saying you sacrifice quality.
Yeah.
But I'm saying maybe if you aim for excellence instead of perfection, you'll get more initiative. And again, if you're worried about the team making mistakes, I'm like, just take a quick look in the mirror and ask yourself, hey, do I ever make mistakes? And I'm sure you do. Look, everybody does. And so actually now and then, it's good. The guys might make a mistake, and that's just got to be okay as long as it's in service.
This is important because now that you own the business and you're the leader, your mistakes are different. And one of your big mistakes, maybe not letting people take initiative.
That's right. So and again, like, you might make mistakes with this, where you come down hard on someone for their mistake.
That's okay.
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong, man. If somebody has a huge problem, you might jump in from time to time, but I think the big thing is that more you can value initiative over perfection, you'll still get excellence. You'll just also get your sanity back.
100%. Love that. I think that's a good place to land this plane.
Let's land this plane.
So, developing competent and confident staff who can take initiative is tricky, but it 100% can be done. And it's all about putting the effort to develop the problem solving of your team. Help push the responsibility for making the jobs and the decisions back to them, and that's going to help them grow and work independently. And so that's the 131 technique, where we give them, we ask them to give us one problem, 3 suggestions, and then 1 solution.
That's
Do
it.
that. Watch your team just switch their brains on and become exceptional.
Hey, I hope you liked the video. Check out all the other videos in the channel and like and subscribe.